Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. Happy New Year. I've got a fascinating guest for you today, Brad Smith from Stellar Insight. He's got a really interesting story, and today we're going to talk about business growth, business achievement, intuition, which is really interesting, and his personal journey and insight as a founder and CEO. So, Brad, welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a connection through Podmatch, and you have an interesting story. Lay the groundwork for this fantastic discussion by starting off with your experience and your story.
Well, let's fall term freshman year at Oregon State. I was a chemical engineering student and living away from home for the first time and developed a bleeding ulcer. Not good. And I didn't know how bad it was until I got to the doctor. And he literally changed my life in three sentences. His first one was, "Gee, Brad, if you'd have waited 6 weeks to come see me, you'd have bled to death." So he completely woke me up, if I wasn't already. And then he said, "You'll never eat strawberries, corn, or lettuce, or anything with roughage ever again in your life." And that my internal response to that was, "Fat chance, buddy, that's not happening." And then because I like strawberries. And then he said, and this was the pivotal one, "You have a psychosomatic disease. Your emotions affect the severity of your symptoms." And in that moment, knowing that I had the chance to bleed to death, literally, because it was bad, um, I took on the commitment to conquer the disease. Well, that I didn't know how. I just knew that emotions were malleable to some extent. And as I took courses in psychology, and then eventually understood within a year or so that we can rewire our emotions. And from that, then, over a period of 4 years, I got the bleeding stopped in about a year. I got the pain, which was constant, stopped within about 3 to 4 years, down to where it was at least episodic and intermittent. Through a year, I would have two or three times where it would flare out. So I changed my diet. The medicine didn't work. And over time, so eventually, 29 years later, at age 47, I tracked down all the memories so that they gave me the ability to look at patterns in my life and then go back into the internal causes of them, if you would, the subconscious programming that's there. And I'd recognized I was the only one that was suffering. I was the one that had made the decisions. And so I went back in with hypnosis and reprogrammed a specific memory from about 10 or 12 months old at my first spanking. And we're reworking that within a year. All my symptoms were gone, like gone. So what I learned out of that was we are designed, if you would, as human beings to rework who we are, take our programming, because we show up and we're blank and we're sponges. And so until we hit about age 5 or 6, when the analytical mind shows up and starts working, we are open sponges and we suck in everything, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff. And it's all there. And we can either be victims to it or we can conquer it. So that's the foundation. Pattern watching, reworking the subconscious, reworking the conscious mind, and choosing to be who we want rather than reacting. So if you have negative reactive emotions, they're programming from your early childhood. You may not think they are, but they are.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I've heard just rewiring, just kind of making re excuse me, making yourself perceive things differently. That's all of that is really interesting. And then so kind of talk about you've got this extensive background which I want to delve into more, but focus more on for the business growth for the business minded audience. Your
There's
experience in
more.
various roles. What are some of the common challenges you've observed when trying to grow?
So I'm going to add another piece to my story. And that is growing up. We moved from Indiana to Oregon when I was 12 years old. And I watched my dad take his bachelor's in chemical engineering and his PhD in biochemistry and be involved in or instrumental in starting up 34 companies. Of those 34 stories that all came through the house, I learned how to kill a company and how to grow it. And so that triggered me into my executive coaching.
Yeah.
So what does it take to be, ask your question again. I apologize.
Well, so what are some of the most complex issues that you've seen with business owners trying to grow and scale, and how do you help them?
When I sit down with a client, potential client, in the first hour, and I give that away just so that we can interview each other and see if we can build rapport. First thing I look for is there rapport between who I am and who they are, right? Are they kind? Are they ambitious? Are they ambitious? I don't want to work with someone who's just, oh, okay, right? Ambition is required, but they have to be kind and they have to be curious. Those three requirements. So then I listen to their character and who they are. What are the things in their business model that interfere? What are with their success? What are the things in them that interfere? And what situations need to be fixed, if you would, restructured, rewired? And so I listen for those things. What is common is people are either, almost no one practices situational awareness. No one. And so if someone learns that they have an issue there and they are willing, I'm a 27, 28-year meditator. And all that is sitting down, closing your eyes, and practicing internal and eventually external awareness. If I know my current situation and I have a goal, the difference between where I'm at and where I want to be is a pathway of a set of processes that I have to instigate and put into place. Do I delegate well, or do I have founder's dilemma and think I'm the only one that can do it, right? So have I learned to delegate? That's often what I have to teach my clients. How do you delegate? How do you hire? How do you plan out the hiring? So I have a process I call the plate exercise. What have you got on your plate? Everybody that's listening, do this. What have you got on your plate that you have no business doing? Someone else that's way cheaper than you are per hour can be hired to do that. I don't care if it's a CFO or an accountant, whatever. Hire somebody else to do that that's better at it than you are. So learn how to assess people, learn how to understand what works and what doesn't work, and you can build it out from there. Then you take everything that's on your list of I have no business doing and turn that into a hiring list. And then from there, hire the people that are going to be better than you
Mhm.
and then train them.
Yeah. Yeah. So well said. So kind of moving on to the next question is this idea with where you basically you talk about theory to practice in business, and you say everything's a theory until you can experience and consciously repeat the experiment and share a real life example.
Well, the first real life example of I had the theory that my colitis, my bleeding, could be stopped by rewiring my emotions, right? And so I went in after that. Did it take me a long time to learn it? Yes. So had I had a mentor like Brad to teach me how to do that, I could have shortened the process up to about 6 months, literally 6 months, maybe a year, right? At the most. And that's only depends on your speed of learning. How long does it take you to go from an intellectual realization to an emotional realization to a reworking of the situation? There's a time involved. So, okay, I wandered off. Go ahead. What else?
Yeah, and I love that. Next question is you talk about leadership and business achievement, and in your view, of how does the character of a leader directly influence success or failure of a business? What qualities do you think are most crucial for a leader in today's environment?
Okay, let me put it this way. It's a question. Can you grow a company very far beyond the limitations of the leader? No, ever. So if you've got issues, it's either you or your executive team that are having issues. And if you're blunt and honest and kind about how you open yourself up to that, right? Work your way through those blocks. Look at the patterns around you. What are the issues in the business that are recurring? And recognize you're part of the issue. I watched my very first job, well, one of my first jobs was in a retail store. And I watched the manager of that store not just hire people that were around him that were clones of himself, but just the people that would show up to interview were reflections of his issues. It didn't mean he was a bad person, he was a good person, but it's like his issues just showed up in the people, if you would, synchronistically to show up to interview and say yes to the interview. So
Hmm.
one
Yeah.
of my heroes in that area is Abraham Lincoln had enough courage to have people in his cabinet that were opposite of what he saw. Did he always do what they said? No, but he listened to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Um, yeah, I think leadership in today's business environment is very complex, and I think it's not for the faint of hearted. What really fascinates me talking to you is this deep intuition, and I use my intuition a lot. And so how does one develop intuition? What is it? How can it be a game changer for leaders and innovators?
Okay, so Chris, I'm going to go back a moment and add one more thing to the leadership. Leadership is about inspiration. And if you can read someone else, which is part of intuition, you find out what's important to them and you line up what's important for the business and what's important for that person, and you inspire them to their best. Hold people accountable to their very best. I had a list of values I had in my company, and for the few times I've had employees, every year I have them list out their top 10 or 15 um, ambitious values and goals that they're ambitious in, and then rank themselves, and then at the end of the year rank themselves again. Where are you in integrity? Where are you in honesty? Where are you in work ethic? All of those things, right? So that's one way to get alignment. Now I keep falling off track. Now intuition. um I started meditating 27 years ago, 28 years ago. Um, and one of the evolutions is intuition happens. We have 5 brainwave levels. I don't know much about one of them, gamma, but I've studied the other 4. We do our analytical thinking in the beta brainwave level. We do our daydreaming, if you would, like taking a shower when ideas pop in. That's the alpha brainwave level. The theta brainwave level is described as the top level of a sleep cycle, and delta is the bottom 30 minutes of a 90-minute sleep cycle. So if you go to sleep, you're in theta, and then you go deeper. And you can train your brain over time into holding those open. So I've gotten to the place, because I've worked that way, I can consciously move my brainwave level down to the theta and even into the delta brainwave level and hold it open during a conscious conversation like this. When you have availability to theta on an ongoing basis, you've opened up intuition at a much deeper level. When is it that you have your epiphanies? Almost always, what's happened is your soul, if you would, is feeding you information, and then everything lines up, and you go, oh, that makes sense, and that's why. And you don't have to have any doubt about knowing that. Intuition at a deep level is like living in the middle of a pool of epiphanies, constant insight.
Mm. So how
Why,
does
why do
I'm
you think I
sorry.
named my company Stellar Insight? Because I realized about 8 years ago what I sell is insight.
Yeah. Which is really interesting. So how do people keep their intuition open, and why do some people are more intuitive than others? And I'm just for the audience.
Um, if you have epiphanies, pay attention to when they show up. I have this practice where when I was doing formulation chemistry, I trained myself into using the waking sleeping cycle to get epiphanies. You go take a nap, you go into theta, right? And if you go completely unconscious, you go into delta. But pose yourself a question, write down all the things that are bugging your issues, and then list out all you know about them. So I would take a formula, I'd list out all the things that I knew that were working and put out the gaps, the empty puzzle pieces, if you would, and go take a nap. And I'd almost always wake up with, oh, there's a solution. So I'd work my way toward that solution. And I would train myself to use that time. But over time, if you're doing meditation, so request of everybody, find a method and do it every day. And whatever it is, doesn't matter whether it's Zen, counting breaths, doesn't matter whether it's binaural beat, I use that. It doesn't matter if it's mantra, I also use that, like transcendental meditation. I use those in combination, and I have found that our consciousness has a muscle in it. Okay. The muscle of presence. Am I more present? Am I less present? So if you can make yourself more present and consciously do that, you're exercising the end goal of meditation, which is to be able to regulate your consciousness in and out of presence. And then over time, get to the place where you can put an and in the middle so that you can be not present and present simultaneously. There's the higher level.
Mm, interesting.
And the not present is where the intuition shows up, right?
Mm,
So I think of my subconscious mind as a pool of information connected to, if you would, the collective subconscious. So my subconscious is my connection to that. And my dream state and my sleeping state are a pool. So the surface of the subconscious, if I have a problem, I will put a piece of my awareness there and wait for the answer to show up. And
mm,
if you're waiting for answers to show up, over time, if you practice that, your intuition will deepen.
mm. I love that. How does fear, worry, and trust play? Because sometimes you don't get answers when you use this method.
Patience is a good skill. Patience and waiting. If you're older than 8 years old, you can build patience, right? Maybe I have some kittens in the house, so they're not very patient yet. But um, so emotions, we're built this way. We have a physical body, we have an emotional self, we have an analytical self, analytical mind self, we have an intuitive self, and we have above that, depending on what you believe or experience, you have a spiritual self. That's the more eternal part of you. Okay.
Mhm.
These are, I describe my body as a Chrysler. I apologize, or whatever, a Yugo, right? If you treat it really, really well, you might get 100,000 miles out of it, right? 100 years. So if you treat yourself well and listen carefully to your physical body,
Mm,
but above that, you have an emotional self and all those unconscious choices you made as an infant or a toddler about your emotional self, all the negative reactive emotions you have
mm,
are part of that early programming, and they're useless. They're compensations. What's the purpose of anger? The purpose of anger is to compensate for our internal. All right, go back. As I studied things and worked my way through certain kind of issues in my life, I recognize that the moment we're born, or within seconds, we make a decision. The first one is, I'm not capable, and the subtext is, of getting what I want. The second one is, I'm not responsible. The third one, eventually, most of us make is, I'm not valuable, because we choose our self-worth at an unconscious reactive level. And so what we're doing is we're going back in and reworking. If I'm angry, I think I'm not capable. And under that, then I think I'm not powerful in a situation. I get triggered into anger. I show myself that I'm powerful, and then I can try to dominate somebody else. That's the purpose of anger, is to show ourselves we're powerful. Well, if you back up from that and look at it objectively, the anger is the level of force we can bring, and that's how powerful we are. But we don't need anger to do that.
Mm, mm,
Make sense? So every one of our negative emotions is built on a structure that doesn't work. If we actually want to solve that problem, go back in, look at it truthfully, figure out what's underneath it, what the core purpose of that ask yourself an emotion. It's like, is there a purpose to this? It's not if, it's what is it? What
mm,
am I trying to do with this emotion? Wake myself up and pay attention.
mm.
So my wake up at 18 took me on a very long trail.
Yeah. Do you ever have situations where you tap into your intuition and there's no answer? Like just
Oh,
the universe gives you no
repeatedly. Right. But
answer?
that's not because the answer isn't there. It's that I haven't done the work necessary to prepare myself for the understanding.
Mm, mm. So then what do you do under those situations when you get no answer?
Um, well, almost always there's no answer immediately. So I'm just patient. I hold that question out over my subconscious and I
Mm,
wait for the answer. Do I repeat it on a daily basis? Yeah, I repeat it on a daily basis
mhm,
just before I go to sleep at night.
mm,
And if I do that, eventually my subconscious will say, oh, there's a need for an answer here. I'll bring it up and bring it to the surface of the pool and
mhm,
let Brad understand.
Interesting. Yeah. It kind of reminds me of this Bruce Lee saying, when the student is ready, the master appears. It's kind of
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. Very fascinating. How can people find out more about you and check out you? I know you got a YouTube channel and you're on LinkedIn and check you out.
If they want to go to my website, stellarinsightinc.com, it's long. So stellarinsightinc.com. I have a lot of material on there. Your YouTube will be on it in a little while, and some of the others that I've been on. And I have things that I talk about. So I
Yeah.
have a master class that I'm offering um, on deep intuition, and I want people to go through that. It takes about a year and a half for the brain to recalibrate and the energetic system to recalibrate and
Mhm.
train into that. So it takes time.
Yeah.
Be patient, be persistent.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, for all the audience out there, it's really interesting what Brad's done, taking this intuition and kind of bring it to business growth. For all the audience out there, check out Brad's YouTube channel. It'll be in the links in the show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you.